If you teach American literature, chances are you're touching on the theme of the American dream somehow through book clubs, a poetry unit, a look at Gatsby, an essential question that binds together a variety of genres and perspectives. So when I received this request for our Plan My Lesson series, how about a fun way to introduce the American Dream unit for juniors, about 36 of them? I was ready. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how you might introduce the concept of the American Dream through a series of multimedia activities. First, letting students choose which ones to explore, then letting them respond with multimedia of their own, creating a collage of dream experiences for the class to view and use to define the American dream for themselves. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So as usual, I suggest you have your agenda up on the board as students come in to cut down on questions and help guide the flow of class. But today, instead of an attendance question, I want to consider having a short opportunity for individual reflection and writing on sort of a similar prompt to the usual attendance question. So I would put up maybe a slide that says, "Do you believe the American dream still exists?" Maybe like with a picture of the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island or the national parks or something, just some kind of paired image. Or maybe a slide that says, which picture best represents American dream to you? And then again, you could put, the national parks or a house with a little fence around it and a car, or a picture from Ellis Island, or a picture of people coming into the country from another place, or somebody with a business startup or whatever, right? Just put like a variety of images and let students think for themselves, like, what does it really mean to them just coming into this class before you guys have a chance to talk about it? What are their associations coming in? Now, the reason I'm switching this from an attendance question to a writing prompt is an indication of our current political climate. I think it's a complicated time to discuss immigration in class. I don't want to put kids on the spot to try to argue for their views during an attendance question that's meant to build community. So it just feels gentler to let them write and start to process these things at the beginning of class independently. A student whose parents are feeling afraid of an ICE raid, for example, is probably going to have really strong feelings about the American dream right now. And I don't want them to feel like they need to defend that or explain that in class. That feels like too much. Okay, so after you take a few minutes as kids are coming in, settling down, let them write on some kind of an American dream question. Then take a couple minutes to come back together and make a temporary running definition of the American dream together. So this can just be on your whiteboard or your projected slide. Just take a minute and ask students how would they define the American dream and jot down some of their responses. You don't need any one right answer at this point. This is like the before picture. Now it's going to be time for students to start exploring texts, and you can let kids make their own choice if they want to explore these texts alone or maybe with one partner. But the goal here is going to be to showcase a variety of perspectives on the American dream, letting authors and artists reflect on what it means alongside students. So what I would suggest is that you create a clickable slide with texts you want to make available, and then invite students to explore as many as they can in the time you have. So if you're going to give them 20 minutes, some kids may get through all of them because they may go really quickly. Others may, dive in really deep and read really carefully, and they may only do 2, and that's fine. Whatever's working for them. The goal is to give them choice in consuming what pulls them, what feels interesting, and then to let them really fill the time in their own way. So I've developed a lot of these kind of choice boards of of readings lately. Not all readings, like multimedia readings, for lack of a better word, installations. And I think it's quite fun to design them in a colorful way with little kind of illustrations going with the different links. You can do it like that, or you can have like a list of the text that's clickable on a slide and they can click into them, whatever works for you. I, as I am often prone to do, wanted to create this for you. But again, given the current climate, I feel like I can't choose these texts for you. There are a lot of ways to talk about the American dream. There are a lot of perspectives on it that range from extremely negative to extremely positive. And I feel like you're probably going to understand the temperature of your classroom and how you can help people expand their views, and also make it doable for your school, for your community. So anyway, I've put a bunch of text pairing possibilities up for you in the blog post. I have things like the Royal Shakespeare Company's trailer for Death of a Salesman, their big performance of Death of a Salesman. I have a link to the American Gothic painting at the Art Institute of Chicago, a beautiful little video story from Reina Grande called A Migrant Story, about monarch butterflies and her daughter and her own history all woven together. There's a movie trailer for The Sun Is Also a Star, which is an amazing YA novel about a young woman whose family is going to have to leave the United States the next day. And it's everything that happens to her on the day before they leave. And a bunch more, different poems, a mural, a museum exhibit of street art on the American Dream, just a lot of really cool things. So you could shift through a little bit and choose. You could choose 10, you could choose 3, and of course you probably have some of your own pieces that you'd like to add in. So this whole part of the class is just students exploring these things. As they're exploring, you might invite them to star or just sort of jot down their favorite 1 or 2, because they're going to come back to them in just a second. All right, so in the next part of the class, they have explored the multimedia. They're thinking about the American Dream from a lot of different perspectives. And now you're going to invite them, as I said, to go back to the one they found most interesting, or the 2. And they're going to try to showcase the perspective of that text or texts in a little collage of media. So just to keep it relatively simple, I'm going to suggest 3 elements in that collage, although you could open it up and let them do it with other types of media too. But I think pretty simple for the time allowed. You could have them pull a key quotation from a piece, add an illustration of their own that somehow gets at the themes of the piece, and create a 6-word memoir to represent their interpretation of the story behind the piece that they're showcasing. So I'm putting in the show notes a couple of examples. I did one for Reina Grande's video, A Migrant Story. And on the left, it has like a realistic photo of a path through the desert, and then it has a silhouette of a woman walking across it, and then sort of monarch butterflies surrounding her as she walks. And then the quote is, she witnessed firsthand what it's like to rise above the circumstances one is born into and find the strength to survive. And then the 6-word memoir is searching for futures filled with hope. So that's just one slide from one perspective in this collection of resources. And then I created one more model that you can showcase that's designed around Langston Hughes's poem, Let America Be America Again. So this one has a photo of what I think is probably, I think it's Yosemite. It's a beautiful photo of a national park, and I faded it out a little bit in the back. And then over the top, I put silhouettes of protesters, and it says, for the quote, hungry yet today despite the dream. And then across the bottom, it says, our America could still be free, as the 6-word memoir. And then I designed a little template, sort of very similar to the 2 models, so that if your students want to work in Canva, they can work in Canva. You could also create a model like this in slides. It's very straightforward. As always, when you provide a template to students, I suggest you also give them the choice to go off template. And again, they could work digitally, but they could also have the choice to work with paper and markers or colored pencils or paint or whatever you have available. So once students have completed their pieces, it's time to do either a gallery walk or a digital gallery, like a virtual tour. So if it's digital, you can have everyone drop their work into a collab slideshow, which they can then explore, or you can show up on your digital projector. But the idea is for them to now be seeing a whole bunch of perspectives. So they're going to see other people's interpretations of pieces that they did read or watch and explore. And they're also going to see representations of perspectives and artists that they did not have time to explore. So the idea is it's just kind of an immersive couple of minutes in different views on the American dream. And of course, you can kind of remind them it's not like there's one right answer for what the American dream is. It means something different to different people. And that's sort of the point here. We're trying to collect a bunch of different perspectives on the idea, and none is right or wrong. Now, as they explore what their classmates have created, you could do this however you want, but I always like to give some kind of a little prompt, something that students should be collecting, thinking about, responding to as they view each other's work, because otherwise it's pretty easy to be like, yep, I looked at them all. Okay, I'm done. And that's maybe not the most productive. So I would ask them to choose and write down 5 descriptive words or phrases for the American dream based on what they see in these pieces. So this could be very different than what they put in their collage. It could be different than what you guys put for the definition at the start of class, but just looking at what they see at these pieces of multimedia designed around all these different perspectives, how would they describe the American dream in 5 words or phrases based on the gallery? Now, probably you just have a couple of minutes left, and I want you to revisit as a class now the initial definition for the American dream that's up on the board. But now that board is going to be getting erased before your next class. So I want you to grab a giant Post-it or a big piece of butcher paper, a poster board, whatever that you can put up on the wall and leave up throughout your unit, and refine your definition a little bit with the class. Invite students to share some of the descriptive words and phrases that they wrote down as they viewed the gallery, and see how the definition has shifted, assuming that it has shifted. You can even invite them to come up and write their words and phrases on that big piece of paper or Post-it if you want the definition just to encompass everything that they thought about as they viewed the gallery, or you can just listen to a lot of responses and kind of write down the common themes. But now, hopefully, as you leave this lesson behind, your students have really thought about the American dream from their perspective, and then from a lot of perspectives, and then sort of brought it all together into one final location that can then be just a guiding factor throughout your unit. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about this introductory American dream lesson. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.